Hi, this is Brent Berudis with a company called Partnership Group Sponsorship Specialist, and I'm glad to be here and even happier that you're here to watch this video. It's all about how can municipalities raise revenues without raising taxes or user fees. If you're interested in that, stay tuned and we'll get started. I'm just going to first of all bring up a PowerPoint so that you can look at that rather than watching me specifically. Let's see, here we go. Let's take a look and see where we are. So, as I said, the real question here is about whether or not do you need extra revenue, and do you want extra revenue without having to raise taxes or user fees? If you're interested in that, I can hopefully help. So, this is the title of the session, Raising Revenues Without Raising Taxes or User Fees. And what we're going to investigate is the how and the why of this. So initially, I have some questions for you. You don't have to respond because this is a video. But what you can do is think in the back of your head, do I or do I not? So first of all, the big question is, do you need more revenue? If you don't need any more revenue and your tax base works well and your user fees and you can raise them as much as you want, then you can probably tune out now because you don't need any more revenue from alternate revenue sources outside of taxes and user fees. The second question I have for you is, are you looking for ways to generate revenue other than increasing user fees and taxes? If the answer is no, we live in a community where our citizens don't mind when we raise our taxes or our user fees. Then again, you don't need to be here for the rest of this session. But I also have to ask you, have you really considered true corporate sponsorship as a revenue channel? I can tell you right now, it won't be your golden goose. It won't be the place that's going to solve all your financial woes in your community. But what it will do is be part of that puzzle if it's done correctly. So those are the initial questions I have for you. And if you answered yes to any of these, then maybe you should stick around. And if you answered no, you don't need more revenue, or no, you don't need to worry about raising taxes, then I encourage you to jump over, watch another video, or go grab a cup of coffee, or take the 15 minutes that you had allocated to this to put back into your day. So the questions that also exist are ones that exist in the community. And I want to address these because these are probably on your mind as well. So first of all, I always hear, and so do our competitors, that our buildings are owned and paid for by the taxpayers. Why should a corporation get to put their name on it? And that's a really good question. But they're not paying for the building of the building. They're not paying to buy the building. If they wanted to buy the building, they could do that and put their own name on it. But that's not their goal and objective. Their goal and objective is to market and build brand awareness for their company. So they can put that same money into the local newspaper, the same radio station, and they can buy exposure there, or they could buy it by putting their name on a building. So they're not actually purchasing the building. They're just buying and paying for the value that's associated to have their name exposed in alignment with it. So that's the big difference. And the answer to the other half of this question about why should a corporation get to put their name on it? Well, because they're willing to pay for the exposure at a fair market value. And granted, they didn't buy the building, they didn't pay for the construction of the building, but the reality is if this can help to encourage taxes not to be raised at an incremental rate or user fees to go up at an exorbitant rate, then most citizens will probably be pleased. Is this potential, this revenue that we're talking about, is it just for capital revenue or on new projects, or is it operational revenues? Really good question. First of all, we tell all our clients sponsorship is not based around, nor should it be based around capital revenue growth. Like if you're looking to build a new building and you need to capitalize and you need to get some capital into there, this is not the solution. The solution for the outcome of using corporate sponsorship is to help your operational revenues, to make sure that you can, once you get that building built, because capital revenue is a whole lot easier to come by to build a new building than operational revenues. So sponsorship revenue, naming rights revenue, that money from corporations should be going to operational revenue channels, not to paying for a new building. So how will this affect my department? I get that question asked a lot from different departments within municipalities. And you know what? The truth of it is, it's going to affect everybody's department, from finance to operations, from marketing, communications, over to programming. Everybody's going to be affected, because sponsorship isn't a silo that fits into one specific department. It's integrated with everything in your municipality. So it does affect everybody's departments, and that's why everybody needs to be a part of the process. And the best sponsorship programs, the best run ones, have integrated programming through and communications to all departments that are affected at any given point in time through all the different departments by sponsorship. And the other one is, how will this affect our user groups? If we're out there taking money from the marketplace, how will they get money? Well, the be all and end all of it is that typically when a municipality gets into the sponsorship business, they raise the bar in the community. They're typically more professional. They've got more experience in doing this type of work. They're more professional. And the end result is that they raise the bar in the community. And as a result, all those user groups, they gain extra money as a result. At first, there's fear, and that does abound. And quite often there's misleading information that's going out to the communities with those of people that are opposed to corporate sponsorship. And they will tell people that, oh, you're going to lose all your revenues. I don't know a single municipality in Canada that's happened in. And we've been working coast to coast for 20 years in this business. It typically will raise the bar in the community, and everybody makes more money. And a lot of municipalities have engaged people to come in and help those user groups to be able to raise more money. It works well, and everybody benefits. And the last one that I want to talk about is citizens don't want corporate names on buildings. Well, we heard that a lot. So we hired Nielsen Ratings, you know, the people that do the TV ratings and everything. We hired them through their company called Repucom to do research to find out if this was true. So we actually had over 1,500 people interviewed on telephone interviews combined with an online interview. Sorry, it was over 2,000 people. And we were able to, across the country, coast to coast, and in both French and English. And the end result was the following. Here are the results from the municipalities section of the Canadian sponsorship, Canadian consumer sponsorship rankings, specifically in municipalities area. 85% of Canadians, coast to coast, said that companies should be able to sponsor public spaces such as hockey rinks, ballparks, and recreational facilities. 1 in 2 of those Canadians said they should be able to even retitle existing buildings that were named after prominent citizens or community benefactors. But note that this is 1 in 2. Actually, it's 49% of Canadians believe that that was okay. So the reality is that this is half and half. Doesn't matter. We tell most of our clients to stay away from renaming of existing buildings, named buildings. But in some cases, that works just fine as long as it's communicated and done well. Things like the Taylor Field became Mosaic Stadium at Taylor Field. We've seen so many of these opportunities when they were done right. They've been able to switch after the building or a property or a program was named after an individual. So it can be done. It's also messy when it's not done well. But come back up top to that 85%. That's a lot of Canadians that are really in favor. 8.5 out of 10 Canadians believe that sponsoring public spaces, such as those community rinks, ballparks, and recreational facilities, is a good thing to happen. Also note, though, Canadians were really clear. 3/4 of Canadians said that just because a company sponsors or puts a name on a building, they should not get preferential treatment to win the business locally. They still have to win it clear and transparently through an RFP process, those sorts of things. So just because A corporation comes along, puts their name on the building, doesn't mean that they can get all the city's business. They have to win it fairly and through transparency and process. So this study, a few other details for you, but the Canadian Municipal Benchmarking Survey on Sponsorship and Naming Rights, done by a competitor of ours, great stuff, Bernie Coulterman and his group, the Center of Excellence for Public Sector Marketing. And this shows that 66% of Canadian municipalities are already involved in some form of corporate sponsorship or corporate engagement. And the most common assets are naming rights, events, programs. Those all take place, and probably all of your communities are already into these elements. So the next step is, how can you actually make good money out of it? Most common length or term for naming rights is 5 to 10 years, and that is actually coming down a little bit. Perpetuity agreements are now very scarce. So I thought I would lay out the process. If you're interested to get into the sponsorship game, you need to figure out first and foremost what you have to sell. Then you need to determine the real market value of those assets and the inventory to determine the feasibility of operating a sponsorship program. If you're not going to make enough money, don't get in the game. So figure out what you have to sell, figure out what it's worth and how much money you can make, and then you can take the program to market and bring in the cash. I've oversimplified it, but those are the steps. I'd be glad to talk to anybody if you want to reach out to me on more detail on those steps. So there's lots of municipalities across the country that we've worked with, our competitors have worked with, and that are doing sponsorship professionally. Whether that's a big city in a metropolis like the city of Toronto, or whether it's a community the size of Winkler, Manitoba, and it was 16,000 people or 10,000 people in a place like Morinville, or the recreational or the tourism center of Whistler, BC, or the city of Melville in Saskatchewan. These are all examples of municipalities that have got involved in sponsorship and are doing really well with it, with that extra revenue. So what can you expect for revenue? Typically know that it's once you've got your inventory done and your valuation done, it's going to take about 1 to 3 years to really reach the plateau once you hit the ground running, going after that money. Typically, you can generate anywhere from $250,000 to $5 million, or like a city of Toronto operating annually with revenues around $33 million a year. But small municipalities like a town of Melville, or the town of the city of Winkler, or the town of Morinville, those organizations are all making at least $250,000 of additional revenue a year, some of them higher. So whether you're small or large, there's money to be made. You must, though, to be able to be successful, you must have an inventory asset valuation, you have to have policy in place and strategy, and then you have to follow it. So to recap, the recipe for success is undertake an inventory asset valuation, build policy and strategy, take it all to market, and have extra cash to use. That's my email address. I encourage you, if you have questions, if you want to know more, or you just want to chat about it, I'd be glad to block some time with you and have a Zoom call, or just have a telephone call, good old-fashioned telephone call, or if I'm in town, I'm glad to come by your office, sit down and chat with you. So you can reach me at brent@partnershipgroup.ca. Thanks for listening. I hope this presentation was useful to you and your community. And again, I encourage you to reach out if you have any questions. Thank you.